Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about the people you should try to get to know in any legal job you have. Your Law School Toolbox host today is Alison Monahan, and typically I'm with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together with the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta, I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about the people you should try to get to know in any legal job. So welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Well, we wanted to talk about this topic because it's nearly always the case, at least in any office job, that there are lots of people who help the wheels on the bus, as it were, keep turning. And it's really beneficial to identify and get to know the people that you're going to need to know to get your work done. And of course, there may be other useful opportunities to connect in other ways. So whether this is a summer position or a longer term job, who do you think people should be looking to get to know when they start working in a law job?
I feel like I'd start with the support staff, which I think isn't necessarily where a lot of summers or new associates start. I think they think about the lawyers that they're working with. And so I would definitely start with your secretary. These days, I think a lot of times it's like a pool of secretaries for a group of people. So get to know all of them because you don't know who you'll need to work with or ask things about. But I think they're super important, and a lot of them have been at the firm a long time and they may just know a lot of things. So they could be kind of your go-to.
I think that's definitely right. I would also put the paralegals on any case into that category. You know, these are typically career people. And so particularly if you're coming in as a new associate or, working in a new place you haven't been before, or even a summer associate type position or an intern, these are the people who know how to do things. And one of the most critical things I learned very quickly is these are the people who know how to file things. And that's incredibly important because, if you've gone to law school, you don't necessarily know how to use the electronic filing system for a particular court or whatnot, but there are people who do know that, and you need to figure out who those people are because they're the ones who are going to help you actually file your documents when you're under pressure at the last minute to get this stuff, done before the day closes, basically.
And I think it's key with them to make it clear that you know that they know more than you do
right
from the beginning. So when you're asking them things, make it clear that you really respect them and you know that they know how to do all that stuff and you're very grateful for them to show you.
No, I think that's absolutely right. You don't want to go in with this attitude of I'm the lawyer and you just get my stuff done. This is an actual area of real expertise and you need to appreciate it.
Definitely. And you should know where your place is, if you're supposed to be doing it or if you're supposed to be telling somebody else to do it or how. So don't just assume that you're supposed to be assigning things out for sure.
Right. And ultimately in the end, it's, if something goes wrong, it's going to be not the problem of the secretary or the paralegal who is doing this. It's going to be your problem or the problem of the lawyers that you work for. So yeah, I think that idea of kind of knowing, where you stand in this system is really important, and also taking blame and not assigning blame that other people should not be getting if they screw something up.
Absolutely. And also if they're teaching you something that you're going to need to know again, take notes, make sure you're paying attention because you don't want to be asking people the same thing over and over again that you should have been listening to the first time.
Right. I mean, I think, generally speaking, people understand you've never done this before. They're happy to explain it to you once, maybe 1.5 times. But after that, you really should only be asking questions about things that are new, not wait, what was the URL that we went to for filing in the Northern District of California? You can Google that,
Exactly. And part of this is who you should know, but also you want them to like you.
Right.
It's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, exactly. Not just know you as that annoying person who always treats me like I don't know anything when I know more than they do. No, you want to be the person who's that person's always super friendly and respectful. And wasn't it nice that they brought me candy that one time they asked for a favor?
Exactly. So I think you just need to have a good attitude with everybody and make sure that, they know that you respect them for what they do. I also think the librarian is a great person to know.
Oh, for
They
sure.
can tell you all sorts of things.
Yeah, if you're lucky enough to still have a research librarian where you're working, you definitely want to make friends with that person.
I think it's really important. I'm also thinking the IT people, anyone who knows anything about like document management systems or, your computer, whatever devices, all of that stuff, particularly if you'll be working remotely. So know who you need to get in touch with and, how you get on their good side so they'll maybe put you first.
Right. Or do you like a favor, when you can't connect to your email for some reason? Yeah, I know we harp on the document management system all the time. People are probably still really tired of hearing it. It's really important. You need to figure out how that works. And if you have questions, you need to know who to go to with them because people will go out of their mind if you screw this up.
I think it's my number one most important thing to know.
Other than like basically being on time for things, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also something I'm sure we talk about incessantly. Also, who you go to for reimbursements and what the process is, I think is important.
Yes.
I know that I've had weird situations where, let's say, a summer or a new associate drops some receipts on my desk as like the recruiter. That's just terrible.
You're like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, like I don't just take your receipts and figure out how to do it. So normally it would be through a secretary, probably. You keep your receipts, you say what it was for, in detail, and they may need a billing number that you have, or they may already know, but figure out what the system is, do it, in the right way. Maybe you're supposed to do it all at once a week. Maybe you do it as you go, but figure it out. And I just find it kind of disrespectful if you don't know who does what and you sort of ask the wrong person in a, kind of rude way.
Right. Because your job is not to do some summer associates like receipts for them.
Exactly.
But there is somebody whose job it is to help you with that. And you need to know who that person is. And probably, as you said, is your secretary who probably has a form for it and they know the process and they can tell you like, this is, how you do it. So hopefully your secretary likes you.
Exactly. And I wouldn't have cared if the person just said, oh, I'm not sure what to do with this. Right. And I would have said, oh, go to your secretary or refer them to like the summer manual that probably says that. So that's different. It's totally fine to ask questions.
Right. Exactly. If you come in with the attitude of like, oh, I don't really know how this should be done, but please let me know and I'll follow the correct procedure. That's very different from like, hey, here are my receipts from that event we went to.
Exactly.
You're like, great, thanks for sharing. What do you want me to do about it?
And it's stuff at this point in time the person should have known. So I think that made it even worse. So, I also think there's stuff you can sort of get away with the first week that you can't, on year two.
Right, exactly. At some point, it's assumed that you will figure this out. Along those lines, I think once you start really working, particularly, knowing who does the travel stuff is really critical. Like I didn't even know we had travel agents until I'd probably been there like 2 years and I was stuck on some case in the middle of nowhere. And like, I could like literally couldn't get a flight. And the partner's just like, well, why haven't you talked to like Bob? And I'm like, who the hell's Bob? She's like, oh my God, you don't have Bob's number? Like this guy is amazing. He will get you upgraded everywhere. Like never book your own travel again. Like just call Bob. And I'm like, why didn't you give me this number? She's like, oh, I don't know.
That is definitely something that you should know from the beginning. Hopefully they've told you, where all of these things are. But I agree. I would locate how it works. And also you should know the firm's system for travel. So some places, you can decide you can book it on your own or you can book it through them. Maybe there's an airline you want to use because you have miles. There's some places where you can't do that and you may get in trouble or may not get things reimbursed. So you really want to be clear on how you're supposed to do things and who can help you. And, a lot of times with travel and law firms, things get changed. And so they, may have a system for how you need to change things and they may not have change fees and things like that. So just be really clear on that.
Right. Yeah. No, this was clearly just like information that had not yet been revealed to me because I hadn't earned, Bob's personal number. I really felt like I was in like the very inner circle once I had that. And I'll tell you, it was life changing. I started only flying business class after that. It was great.
That is pretty great. I don't know
Yeah.
when we'll get back to travel, but when we do,
When we do, aim for business class upgrades with your personal travel agent if you can.
and get Bob's info.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it just literally had never occurred to me, but it was probably a valid question to ask when I started traveling, like with a partner. Like, hey, is there anybody that you use to book this that I should talk to? I could have asked that question. I just literally didn't think about it.
Yeah. So we're giving you the inside scoop.
Yeah, and nobody's going to get upset if you ask that. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, talk to this person. Or nope, just book it yourself. Like, it's totally fine.
Exactly. Another area that I think that people don't think about are who does bar dues or CLE. It's different in every firm, how this is handled. Sometimes it's through HR or professional development team is usually who it is. And it may be a different person that handles bar dues, then tells you about trainings and things like that. But you should know who it is because even though a lot of times the firm is paying for stuff and maybe even sending it in for you, or they may not be, it is ultimately your responsibility. So if something doesn't get paid and something isn't sent into the bar, you are the one responsible for that, no matter what the firm was supposed to do.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, there are definitely people who should be handling this, but ultimately it's your problem. So, I think the CLE is a great one. Like, you want to find out what the policy is because almost certainly whoever you're working for is going to have the ability to get you CLE credits, so you don't have to pay for them yourself. But it may not be the case that you can just go and do whatever you want. They may have a subscription or something. So you want to make sure that you are, kind of covered on that and you're doing what you should be doing.
And also a lot of times they'll have trainings, but you need to make sure that you signed in and out
Right.
and you were there for X amount of time. So know what the rules are. Again, they should tell you, but you may need to ask. And I know firms used to have it where the secretary would keep track of everyone's CLE. And that's sort of moving away from that, I think, with kind of less secretaries and kind of more personal responsibility. So they may do that for you, they may not, but ultimately you should also have a copy in a file of all your CLE if it ever came up that you would need to produce it. It's not your secretary's responsibility to keep that file.
Right. I think you should literally have a paper file. And so even if you have an electronic version of something that you went to, like whatever they provide you as evidence that you were actually attending this, you should just print out, pop in that folder, and then at the end of the year or the end of 3 years or whatever it is in your state, you just pull that out. It's very easy. It's very clean. If you ever need to document it, there you go. You should probably also scan it and put it online. But I think having that paper version is really useful.
But as someone who was responsible for all the bar due stuff at one point, I can tell you that the 2 weeks before everything's due and everyone needs to do their CLE is totally chaotic, and just don't be that person.
Yeah, that was always
just
me.
Scrambling to find stuff.
That was the worst. Sorry. Well, in California, it was every 3 years. And so, you basically have maybe you've gone to a few things, but you haven't really paid attention to it. And then suddenly, you're 2 weeks out. You've got to do all these specific ones. I just remember a number of hours cooking in my kitchen with a CLE in the background where every 6 minutes you have to touch the screen to say you're still there. Yeah, I did that for weeks basically to finish this. That's the main reason I went inactive in California ultimately.
And you also can't do all of them, online or listen to them. I think there's a requirement you do a certain amount in a different way, or there's certain things you can do that are considered more active. So you just need to know what the difference is. And this is way less painful if you're doing it over the 3 years.
Oh,
I just
for
make
sure.
a plug for that. But you should know who can tell you this stuff, where you can find this information, and where you can find out what you'd already done. So know who those people are.
Right, because ultimately almost everyone in the end ends up in some type of a crunch. I mean, best case scenario, you're 5 hours short or something. So, I don't know anyone.
And there's always a way to take care of it, is the thing.
I don't know anyone who hasn't been scrambling to do one or two specific things at the very end.
Absolutely. But I will say that most firms have so many opportunities to get CLE.
I know. There's no excuse for it, but we're busy people. We procrastinate. What can you do?
Absolutely. But if those people like you, they're going to help you more.
Right. Exactly. They're going to be like, oh, you know what? You need to do this one particular required hour of credit. Here's a great seminar you can watch. It's 1 hour long and it's totally online. Go. And you're like, great.
Exactly.
Versus I don't know, here's a really big list of stuff you can look at. Bye.
Yeah, you want someone who can kind of give you the real scoop of this is the easiest way to get this done.
Exactly. I also think it's really important to know kind of who handles just the nuts and bolts stuff of things like document production and copies and like presentations. If you're doing, trial work or really anything, there's certain people who do this stuff, and, particularly document production, like that's a whole system, it's like an entire world to itself, how you get these like Bates numbers on the things and all this stuff. And, they may be asking you all these questions you don't really understand. So anything you can do to kind of make friends in those departments is only going to help you.
And even like marketing, or sometimes there's practice group people, because maybe if there's, any opportunity that you're getting involved with client stuff, so you might need to know who they are too. And, that can hurt.
Right, exactly. I feel like, make friends with everybody basically if you can.
Yeah, and know what they do.
Right, exactly. Understand their job. Lawyers tend to be very arrogant about like not bothering to understand what other people do. And that can be very frustrating for people who, they're like, I'm 20 years into this career and no one understands what I do all day, nor do they seem to care. That is upsetting to me.
So I think you'll really stand out as someone who does, because I agree. I think law firms are really all about the hierarchy. And if you're not somebody who's a billing person, and you're kind of behind the scenes, then you might feel kind of lost and like no one really knows, what your area is. So know what people do, know, what you'd go to them for, and that you appreciate their knowledge.
Yeah, I think every firm I ever worked in, they basically like put all the people who do support stuff in the windowless offices in the middle. And so it was always like this whole world to itself where you're like, wow, this is so different than being on the outside.
And you see how many people it takes.
It's a lot of people.
Law firm going, way more than the lawyers.
Yeah, no. And like you realize like these are really tight knit groups of people. Like they hang out together all day, So yeah, it's an interesting kind of side world that I took a while to realize was even there.
Definitely.
Who else? Well, I think one obvious person to figure out, or people, is the people who actually assign the work. I mean, talk a little bit about how that tends to happen, because I know it's different in a lot of firms.
So in my experience, particularly in the summer, a lot of firms just have sort of a free market system where maybe you look on on the portal online and you can see the different assignments, but you still probably are going through a lawyer. Maybe it's an associate, maybe it's a partner, maybe the partner is kind of supervising the associate who's really doing all the work. And so you're probably going through them to like make sure that you can take it. Or maybe it is just completely free market and you can just pick it, but you should know who those people are. You can talk to them about how much work you have, if you're taking on new things, how this is going to go. You can also talk to them about what you're interested in, what types of assignments you want to get. Maybe there's a particular partner you want to work with. How would you go about that? So I think being kind of a go-getter and talking to whoever it is that assigns it. And then if you're a new associate, it's usually pretty similar. It may be more by practice group, but there's always, I would say usually a junior partner in that situation who's the assignment person. So it's just a good idea to be really open with them. Also, don't hide stuff. Don't pretend like you have more work than you do or the opposite. Just be honest and try to figure it out.
Right, because they're going to find out pretty quickly if you're not actually busy. You might be shocked to hear this, but people in law firms particularly are actually reviewing billing data pretty regularly.
But I'm sort of shocked at how many people do that and think that like they can get away with it, with sort of hiding under the radar. And it might go on for a little bit, but they're definitely going to realize at the end of the month, and especially if it goes on for longer than that. So, if you can't find the work, that's when you talk to them to, find more work.
Right, exactly. I think it's useful to know people in sort of HR, and also if you're a summer associate, obviously in the summer associate team. You guys are the ones really determining on some level, like who's going to get an offer and who's not, or at least coordinating that. So I would think those would be important people to have on your side. Do you think so?
Absolutely. I'm a little biased.
Right.
But I will say that I think that sometimes summers don't realize the influence that, the recruiting person in charge of the summer program, and, there may be a few of them, you should treat them all the same. I don't care if it's the assistant or the director, but they're the ones who are really supposed to get to know you and be able to talk about you. And ultimately, all the attorneys are going to go back to that person and ask them, were there any issues or what do they think of you? That kind of thing. So you really should get to know them. I do think summers usually do get to know the recruiting people and spend time in their office. And, now it may be a Zoom situation. But either way, I would make sure that, they know who you are. And I just mean you can chat with them. It doesn't even need to be about some particular work thing, but they're sort of your go-to. And then usually there's a summer associate team that's a group of lawyers that are sort of going to vote on you at the end and are in charge of organizing events and, work and all of this stuff. So you should definitely know who they are, and you should make sure that each and every one of them know who you are so that there's no issue at the end where they're like, I don't remember them, or I barely saw them. I don't know who they are.
Right. What does that person look like? Do I remember? What school were they at? Oh no, that was a different person. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I know who that person is.
Because I think people really don't want to stand out, for doing anything negative. But I also don't think you want to completely disappear. People want to know you.
Right. I mean, I think that a lot of that really goes down to showing up to things that you're invited to and stuff like that. You don't have to necessarily be, particularly in a virtual scenario, you don't necessarily, need to be dropping by people's office. That's not feasible right now. But if they invite you to a practice group lunch or something, you should probably attend that and, have your computer on and have your name up on the screen. So they're like, oh yeah, Alison, right. She attended that meeting. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, I think just seeing you at things kind of, oh yeah, I've seen her, attend all these things.
Right. She always came to things we invited her to. I like her. Done.
Exactly.
It's not much more complicated.
I think you just need to make sure that you know who all the people are. Because I think sometimes even if they've sort of introduced themselves at the beginning, maybe they're not in the practice group that you've been dealing with the most. But I would just always go back to I want to make sure the summer committee knows me.
Right. Maybe have a list up at your workstation. And if an email comes in from that person who's on the list, inviting you to a lunch thing or whatever, then maybe you're more inclined to accept than versus I don't know who this person is. I don't really care.
Also, it's usually pretty voluntary. So somebody who wanted to be on the summer committee or recruiting committee is actually interested in you.
Right.
And, have the future of the firm and who they're bringing in. So I think they're usually pretty approachable, and you can also ask questions of them if you're not sure who to go to.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I could see is, bring a couple of other summers with you and ask for a virtual coffee date or something with someone hey, these 3 people are interested in your topic or your practice group or whatever, went to the same school. I don't care, any connection, any interest. Hey, would you mind just meeting with us for 20 minutes and having coffee and sharing some of your story? People would love that.
I also think that's nice because they can see that you're developing a relationship with your fellow summers.
Right.
That always stood out to me too. If somebody isn't interacting with the other people in their class, it can be a little odd.
Yeah, and I just think it's a lot less awkward if you have 3 or 4 people there than just you. There's all this pressure. Why did you want to meet with you? What do you want to talk about? I mean, if you have 3 or 4 people and it's 20 minutes, that's 5 minutes per person. You can handle that.
Yeah, just less pressure.
Yeah, and I agree. It looks good to be the leader, oh yeah, we'd like to do this.
Exactly.
All right. Another couple of people I think you should know, the pro bono person, whoever is coordinating that. And also, I think this often gets overlooked, but anyone who's doing associate development. So particularly at law firms and probably other organizations, they've started to become at least a little bit more kind of active about developing their talent. And so a lot of them actually have people who basically are there to do free coaching for you. And I think that often gets overlooked.
Absolutely. And these coaches, a lot of times, it really is confidential. So you can talk to them about whatever they might actually help you with your career.
Right.
That's going to be, it doesn't even have to be there. They might give you, sort of good tips generally. And, you don't just have to talk about what's going on, in this exact firm at this exact time. You could talk about bigger picture stuff. So it's sort of like a free coach.
Yeah, I think it's great. And, I mean, particularly at law firms, they're realistic. They know that most associates leave at some point. And so this is essentially to help you figure out your next move, which maybe ends up benefiting the firm in the end. They're thinking longer term here. Maybe you go in-house and then you send business back. It's not just designed to keep you in this job that maybe you don't want to be in.
Right. I mean, them even having these coaches, it's not just out of the goodness of their heart.
Right.
They are able to transition people out over time because that's just the system. So I really do think it is confidential and you can talk to them. And I totally agree about pro bono. I know that I've said many times about interviews and not talking about pro bono. But once you're there, you absolutely can, and you should get involved and, do as much as, you can. And particularly in the summer, actually, you may be able to do more pro bono because a lot of times there aren't billable assignments or maybe there isn't enough work. Maybe they can't find things. So summers a lot of times do work on pro bono. And so I think it's a great opportunity to sort of get that started and know, what areas there are pro bono, what you might be interested in down the line.
Right, because it's a great opportunity to do something useful and also to develop your own skills. So, at those early stages, firms love it. If you want to go and work on a pro bono case, that's fantastic.
And even as a summer, sometimes you get to do really amazing things. You get to go to court. You get to be involved with clients if you do it through pro bono.
Yeah, I remember I was doing some asylum work, and we were I was in the client interview, which was pretty cool. One other person, I think you don't want to be this person, but you probably want to know who they are and use them accordingly, is the office gossip. What do you think about this?
Completely agree. I think this is key, and there always is one.
There always are. Yeah.
It may not be one person. It's generally someone who's been there a long time.
Right.
So it may be current things that are going on, also things that have happened in the past about different people that you may want to hear. I would be careful what you say to the person.
Right.
If you know they're already the office gossiper, you don't want them sharing your secrets. So probably don't share too much. But it's a good idea to hear what's going on.
Yeah, keep your ear to the ground. Know who to go to if you hear a rumor. Obviously, you have to be careful, but it is a useful person to have some communication with sometimes.
I do find the receptionist can often be this person.
True, or a secretary who's been there forever. Yeah. Those are the most likely candidates, or a paralegal who's been there. But paralegals usually have other work to do. So, typically it's a combination of reception because they know who's coming and going and when, and the older secretaries who know that they can basically not be fired because they know where all the bodies are buried.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how can people really get to know people, whether all these people we've talked about or, your coworkers who are at an equal level, or even mentors or sponsors who are those more experienced attorneys. What can people do, particularly in this virtual environment, to kind of build these relationships?
Well, I would say, I think in a way it may take more effort because you can't just swing by someone's office. I think that can be sort of, the easiest thing. So when we're back in person, just kind of swinging by someone's office in a casual way, I think kind of helps you get to know people. But I think these days I would reach out. I would try to make an effort to, to get to know people at different levels. I agree. So, your fellow summer class, if you're, a summer, or, associates who are sort of at your level. So you're part of a team. Because I think that helps when you're starting out. And I don't think you want to feel like you're in competition with people. I think you want to make it clear that, you're part of this class and you want to get to know people. And so, I think whatever virtual way you can do it, like Zoom, coffee, or things like that. And I would just reach out. And I like the idea of what you said, if you're a summer, of doing it, maybe with another summer. Getting to know them. And hopefully you've been assigned a mentor, or if not, you found a mentor, or there's somebody on the summer committee that's kind of taken you under their wing, because sometimes it's easier if you have someone to guide you a little bit, and hopefully that person is sort of volunteered to do that.
Right. And I think in terms of getting to know your other summers, I completely agree. The people who are the most competitive about it, everyone just ends up kind of hating them. So it's not really the best way forward. It's not really a long-term strategy either, because you might end up working with this group of people again. So I think there, looking at building those relationships, whether it's like a Slack channel or WhatsApp group or something that you guys can talk. I mean, I do think you want to be a little careful and not like too much gossip about like partners in the office and things like that, because you never know what's going to show up on Above the Law. But, within reason, I think you can talk about all kinds of things.
And I know that I've seen some summer classes sort of volunteer to do something together, like maybe they organize an event. And sometimes, they'll tell you like, you can do this, like, here's a budget, that kind of thing. But you can kind of do it on your own. Just something that you're sort of doing together, for the office, or maybe it's a volunteer thing, whatever it is. I always thought it was really nice when the summers, took the initiative together to do something. It just sends a good message.
I agree. I think, any of these organizations are looking for people who get along with other people. And also looking for some leadership qualities and things like that. So I agree. If there's something you're interested in doing and you're like, oh, this would be cool, like, why don't we do this as a group? I think most, legal employers would probably be pretty receptive to that.
And also just a reminder that it's not a competition. There's not, at least usually, X number of spots and more people than that or anything like this. Like, ultimately, everyone hopefully will be your colleague down the line, and you don't need to compete with them for work or whatever it's, for. You're in this together, your class.
Right. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Well, we're about out of time here. Any final thoughts on this topic?
My final thought is just a reminder about, appreciating other people's knowledge at the firm who have been there longer than you. And if you're a summer associate, that's everybody. So, unless there was someone that started after you during the summer, everyone knows more than you. So I would say, learn from them and be humble.
I completely agree. I think there's nothing more obnoxious than like some summer from Harvard coming in and being like, you have to do this. And everyone's like, okay, you're going to be here 3 months or 2 months or whatever. Goodbye.
Yeah. And they will talk about that at the end when they're deciding about giving you an offer. Like, it's not all about the work you do or what school you went to or what your grades are.
Right. I mean, pretty much anyone can blackball you. So if you're rude to your secretary or your paralegal, it's not gonna fly, because those people are valuable.
Absolutely. And you really are going to learn something from them.
Yeah, exactly. You actually don't know what you're doing. That's the key here. That's why one of the reasons you're in this job is to learn something. So try to learn something.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. With that, we are unfortunately out of time. For more career help and the opportunity to work one-on-one with us, you can check out careerdicta.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app, because we'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon. Good luck with your summer job.